The insistent chirping of the alarm clock was the first nail in the coffin of my daily dose of optimism. 5:30 a.m. Another day, another dollar, another round in the never-ending fight against the encroaching forces of chaos and unpaid bills. I rolled out of bed, the muscles in my back protesting with a symphony of pops and creaks that would make a bowl of Rice Krispies sound like a lullaby. The house was a battlefield, a testament to the destructive forces of two small humans and a dog with a penchant for chewing on anything that didn't fight back. I surveyed the scene with a weary sigh, the remnants of last night's family dinner, a culinary masterpiece of chicken nuggets and lukewarm macaroni and cheese, still clinging to the floor like archaeological evidence of a forgotten civilization. Another day, another dollar, I muttered, the mantra a bitter comfort as I began the Sisyphean task of restoring order to the chaos. Dishes piled, laundry sorted, lunches packed, backpacks strategically placed by the door. It was a routine honed by years of relentless repetition, a testament to my unwavering commitment to the role of provider, the title I wore like a badge of honor, or perhaps, more accurately, a ball and chain. By the time the nanny arrived at 8 a.m., the house was a picture of suburban perfection, the battlefield transformed into a Pinterest-worthy haven of domesticity. Melissa, my wife, the queen bee of this carefully curated hive, would emerge around 10 a.m., her perfectly coiffed hair and designer yoga pants a stark contrast to my own rumpled attire and caffeine-fueled existence. "Morning, honey," she'd chirp, her voice a saccharine symphony of practiced cheerfulness that grated on my nerves like nails on a chalkboard. "Thanks for getting everything ready. You're a lifesaver." A lifesaver? Or a life sentence? The question echoed in my mind, a discordant note in the soundtrack of my carefully constructed reality. I'd worked my ass off, juggling 2 full-time jobs while earning my second bachelor's and then a master's degree, all while she pursued her passion for a career that she'd promptly abandoned the moment our first child was born. And now, with a nanny and a mother-in-law who seemed to have more energy than a Duracell bunny, her days were a leisurely blend of yoga classes, online shopping sprees, and mommy and me playdates that sounded more like an excuse for gossip and Chardonnay than actual childcare. "Just doing my part," I'd mumble, the resentment simmering beneath the surface, a bitter taste in the back of my throat. "You're a good man, Adrian," she'd say, her words a patronizing pat on the head that only fueled the growing frustration within me. A good man? Or a fool? The line was blurring. The weight of my sacrifices, my unfulfilled expectations, my unspoken resentment, threatening to tip the scales from gratitude to a bitter reckoning. I was the provider, the rock, the one who held it all together. But at what cost? And for how long? The questions lingered, unanswered, as I retreated to my home office, the door closing behind me a symbolic barrier between the world of domesticity and the corporate battlefield where I fought a different kind of war, a war for promotions, bonuses, and the ever-elusive sense of accomplishment that seemed to lie just beyond my grasp. But even as I immersed myself in spreadsheets and conference calls, the doubts lingered. A persistent hum beneath the surface of my carefully constructed reality. Was this it? Was this the life I had envisioned for myself? A life of endless toil, unappreciated sacrifices, and a growing emotional disconnect from the woman I had vowed to love, honor, and apparently support financially for the rest of our days? The irony wasn't lost on me. I had climbed the corporate ladder, achieved a level of success that had once seemed like a distant dream. But in the process, I had lost something far more precious, my sense of self, my sense of purpose, my sense of connection to the woman who was supposed to be my partner, my lover, my confidant. And as the day wore on, the meetings blurring into a monotonous drone, the emails piling up like unread chapters in a life I was no longer sure I wanted to live, a chilling realization dawned. I was a provider, yes, but I was also a prisoner, trapped in a gilded cage of my own making, my sacrifices a currency that had bought me not happiness, but a comfortable captivity. It wasn't just the early mornings and the late nights, the endless cycle of chores and childcare that felt like a marathon with no finish line. It was the invisible load, the mental and emotional baggage that weighed me down like an anchor. Its chains forged in the fires of societal expectations and traditional gender roles. The finances, a tangled web of spreadsheets and bank statements, were my domain. Melissa, with a wave of her perfectly manicured hand and a "You're so much better at this than me, honey," had abdicated all responsibility, leaving me to navigate the treacherous waters of mortgages, investments, and the ever-looming threat of credit card debt. The house, that supposed haven of domestic bliss, was a constant source of maintenance emergencies. Leaky faucets, temperamental appliances, a garden that seemed to have a vendetta against my sanity. It was a never-ending to-do list that I tackled with the grim determination of a one-man repair crew. And then there were the kids. Noah, my son, and Lily, the spitting image of her mother, both adorable bundles of energy and chaos that could turn a peaceful afternoon into a scene from a toddler-themed apocalypse movie. School runs, doctor's appointments, birthday parties that resembled a sugar-fueled Lord of the Flies reenactment. It was a logistical juggling act that would make a circus clown weep with envy. Even my mother-in-law, bless her meddling heart, had become my responsibility. Her health issues, her car troubles, her endless need for a little help with the groceries, dear. It was a constant stream of requests that I fulfilled with a weary resignation, my resentment simmering beneath the surface like a volcano on the verge of eruption. Meanwhile, Melissa, the queen of leisure, floated through her days like a social butterfly, her schedule a carefully curated blend of yoga classes, online shopping sprees, and lunches with friends that sounded suspiciously like gossip sessions fueled by overpriced salads and Chardonnay. "You're so lucky, Adrian," she'd sigh, her voice dripping with a self-pity that grated on my nerves. "You get to escape the house, interact with adults, have a real purpose." Purpose? I scoffed inwardly, the word a bitter mockery of the life I was living. My purpose was to be the provider, the fixer, the emotional punching bag for a woman who seemed to have mistaken my dedication for weakness, my sacrifices for servitude. "You're the man of the house, Adrian," my father-in-law would boom, his voice a patriarchal echo of a bygone era. "It's your responsibility to take care of your family." Responsibility. The word was a millstone around my neck, its weight dragging me down, its chains forged in the fires of societal expectations and traditional gender roles. I was the man, therefore I was the provider. I was the husband, therefore I was the fixer. I was the father, therefore I was the responsible one. But where was the reciprocity? Where was the appreciation for the sacrifices I made, the burdens I carried, the emotional labor I invested in keeping this family afloat? "Dude, you need to set some boundaries," Chris, my ever-practical friend, would advise, his voice a mix of concern and exasperation. "You're letting her walk all over you." "But she's the mother of my children," I'd protest, the excuse a flimsy shield against the truth that was becoming increasingly difficult to ignore. "She's also the queen of taking advantage," he'd counter, his words a harsh but necessary dose of reality. And as I listened to the chorus of voices, the friends offering advice, the colleagues sharing their own tales of marital woes, the therapist gently guiding me towards a deeper understanding of my own needs and boundaries, the resentment simmered, the frustration grew, the realization that I was not just the provider but also the prisoner of my own making began to take root. I had built a life, a family, a career on a foundation of sacrifice and expectation. But the foundation was cracking, the weight of the invisible load threatening to crumble the carefully constructed facade I had maintained for so long. And as I looked at Melissa, her face glowing with the satisfaction of a woman who had mastered the art of delegation, a chilling question echoed in my mind. Was this the life I wanted? Or was it time to shed the burden, to break free from the chains, to reclaim the man I had been before the weight of responsibility had crushed my spirit? The plush leather couch, once a haven of shared movie nights and whispered confessions, now felt like a battleground. I sat beside Melissa, the distance between us a chasm wider than the Grand Canyon, my carefully chosen words dissolving into the void of her indifference. "Rough day at the office," I sighed, rubbing my temples, the tension a tangible knot in my shoulders. "The Tanaka deal fell through, lost us a major client." Melissa, her gaze glued to the latest episode of some vapid reality show, barely registered my presence. She murmured, her fingers scrolling through her Instagram feed, her attention firmly fixed on the curated lives of others. "It's just frustrating," I continued. "The need to connect, to share, to find some semblance of empathy in the woman who was supposed to be my partner, overriding my usual reluctance to burden her with my work problems. I put in the hours, the effort, the strategic maneuvering, and it all went up in smoke." "Well, that's business, isn't it?" she said, her voice devoid of emotion, her eyes still glued to the screen. "High risk, high reward. You win some, you lose some." "It's not just about the money," I insisted, the frustration simmering beneath the surface. "It's about the principle, the effort, the—" "Oh, please, Adrian," she interrupted, her voice laced with a dismissive impatience that stung like a slap. "Don't start with the woe is me routine. You have no idea what real stress is. Try spending a day chasing after 2 toddlers, dealing with tantrums, cleaning up spills, and negotiating nap times. Then you can talk to me about stress." The words, sharp and dismissive, hung in the air, a testament to the growing chasm between us, the emotional disconnect that had eroded the foundation of our marriage. I had tried, hadn't I? Tried to share, to connect, to find some semblance of understanding in the woman who was supposed to be my partner, my confidant, my refuge from the storms of the world. But my attempts were always met with the same indifference, the same deflection, the same infuriating one-upmanship that left me feeling more alone than ever. "You're right," I said, my voice flat, the fight draining out of me. "I have no idea. You're the expert on stress, on sacrifice, on the burdens of motherhood." The sarcasm hung heavy in the air, a bitter counterpoint to the chirpy soundtrack of the reality show that continued to hold her attention. I retreated to the solitude of my home office, the door closing behind me a symbolic barrier between her world of manufactured drama and my own silent despair. The laptop glowed with the cold light of unanswered emails, the spreadsheets a mocking reminder of the financial stability I had worked so hard to achieve. A stability that had apparently bought me not happiness, but a comfortable isolation. I stared out the window, the city lights blurring into a kaleidoscope of missed opportunities, unfulfilled desires, and a growing sense of disillusionment with the life I had built. Was this it? Was this the culmination of years of sacrifice, of relentless pursuit of success, of unwavering dedication to the role of provider? A marriage that felt more like a business arrangement than a loving partnership. A wife who saw me as a source of income rather than a source of emotional support. A life that revolved around fulfilling the expectations of others rather than pursuing my own happiness. The questions swirled in my mind, unanswered, unanswerable. I had become a stranger to myself, a shadow of the man I had once been, a cog in the machine of a life that had lost its meaning, its joy, its very essence. And as the night wore on, the silence of the house amplifying the emptiness within me, a chilling realization dawned. I was alone. Not just in this moment, not just in this house, but in the very heart of the relationship that was supposed to be my sanctuary, my refuge, my home. The aroma of freshly baked apple pie, a comforting symphony of cinnamon and buttery crust, wafted through the house, a stark contrast to the bitter taste of disillusionment that lingered in my mouth. Martha, my mother-in-law, stood at the kitchen counter, her hands dusted with flour, her eyes twinkling with a warmth that belied the worry lines etched around them. "Adrian, dear," she said, her voice a gentle interruption to the silent brooding that had become my default setting. "Come have a slice of pie. It's your favorite." I hesitated. The temptation to retreat to the solitude of my office, to bury myself in the spreadsheets and deadlines that offered a temporary escape from the emotional quagmire of my marriage, battling with the unexpected invitation to connect, to share, to perhaps even find a moment of solace in the presence of this woman who, despite our differences, had always treated me with a kindness that was both surprising and deeply appreciated. "Sure, Martha," I said, my voice betraying a weariness that I couldn't quite conceal. "Thanks." We sat at the kitchen table, the sunlight streaming through the window, casting a warm glow on the scene, a stark contrast to the shadows that had gathered in my heart. Martha, bless her perceptive soul, didn't waste time on pleasantries. "You're not yourself, Adrian," she observed, her voice gentle but firm, her eyes searching mine with a concern that was both maternal and unsettling. "Something's troubling you." I hesitated, the urge to deflect, to dismiss, to maintain the facade of the strong, silent provider, battling with the unexpected vulnerability that had been simmering beneath the surface for months. But Martha, with her quiet wisdom and her uncanny ability to see through my carefully constructed defenses, had always been a safe haven, a confidant in a world that often felt transactional and emotionally barren. "It's complicated, Martha," I sighed, the words a feeble attempt to encapsulate the tangled web of resentment, frustration, and disillusionment that had ensnared me. "Complicated?" she echoed, her eyes twinkling with a knowing amusement. "Marriage often is, dear, but it's also the most rewarding journey if you're willing to navigate the twists and turns, the bumps in the road, and the occasional detour." I looked at her, surprised by her analogy, her words a refreshing departure from the usual platitudes about communication and compromise that had become the soundtrack to my marital discontent. "I'm not sure I'm on the right road anymore, Martha," I confessed, the honesty a surprising relief. "I feel lost, unappreciated, and frankly, quite lonely." She nodded, her expression a mix of understanding and empathy. "I know, dear," she said, her voice softening. "I've seen it. The way you work tirelessly, the sacrifices you make, the burdens you carry. And Melissa, well, she's not always the most appreciative." The validation, so unexpected, so desperately needed, was a balm to my wounded spirit. Martha, the woman I had once considered an interfering mother-in-law, was now a lifeline, a voice of reason in the cacophony of my own self-doubt. "I don't know what to do, Martha," I admitted, my voice cracking with a vulnerability I hadn't allowed myself to express in years. "You'll find your way, Adrian," she assured me, her hand reaching across the table to squeeze mine, her touch a motherly gesture that filled the void of emotional connection I had been craving. "You're a good man, a strong man, a man who deserves to be happy. Don't let anyone, not even Melissa, make you forget that." Her words, simple yet profound, resonated deep within me, a spark igniting in the darkness of my despair. I was not alone. I was not invisible. I was not just a provider, a fixer, a cog in the machine of someone else's happiness. I was Adrian, a man with needs, with desires, with a right to a life that was fulfilling, authentic, and joyful. And as I savored the last bite of apple pie, the sweetness a welcome contrast to the bitterness that had plagued me for so long, I realized that Martha, the woman I had once considered an outsider, was now an ally, a confidant, a source of strength and support. In a world that often felt cold and uncaring, her observation, her concern, her unwavering belief in me was a gift, a reminder that even in the darkest of times, there are those who see us, who value us, who love us for who we are, not just for what we do. The breaking point arrived. Not with a bang, but with the quiet clink of ice cubes in a glass of whiskey I shouldn't have been drinking at 10 a.m. on a Tuesday. Melissa, oblivious to the storm brewing within me, sat at the kitchen island, her perfectly manicured fingers scrolling through her Instagram feed, her laughter echoing through the house like a mockingbird serenade. "Look at this, Adrian," she chirped, her voice dripping with a saccharine excitement that grated on my nerves. "Tara's husband just surprised her with a weekend getaway to Aspen. Can you imagine? A private jet, a 5-star hotel, skiing lessons with an Olympic champion." I stared at her, the words catching in my throat, the resentment I had been suppressing for months finally boiling over. "Aspen," I echoed, my voice dangerously low, the calm a deceptive mask for the fury that raged within me. While I'm here, drowning in spreadsheets and conference calls, trying to keep this family afloat, you're fantasizing about private jets and ski vacations? Her laughter died abruptly, her eyes widening with a mixture of surprise and indignation. "What's gotten into you, Adrian?" she demanded, her voice laced with a petulant whine. "I was just sharing something I saw. Don't be such a grump." "A grump?" I scoffed, the word a spark that ignited the inferno within me. "I'm the one busting my ass to provide for this family, Melissa. I'm the one who puts in the hours, pays the bills, deals with the leaky faucets, and comforts your mother when she's feeling lonely. And you call me a grump?" "But I'm a stay-at-home mom," she protested, her voice rising with a defensive shrillness that only fueled my anger. "I take care of the kids. I manage the house. You manage to spend hours on social media, shopping online, and gossiping with your friends," I interrupted, my voice laced with a bitter sarcasm that cut through her carefully constructed facade of martyrdom. "You manage to delegate every responsibility that doesn't involve a yoga mat or a mimosa brunch. And you have the audacity to complain about my grumpiness? You're being unfair," she accused, her eyes welling up with tears that were as manipulative as they were predictable. "I work hard, Adrian. Being a mother is a 24/7 job. You have no idea." "No idea?" I roared, the years of suppressed frustration exploding in a torrent of words that echoed through the house. "I have no idea. I'm the one who's been carrying this family on my back, Melissa. I'm the one who's been sacrificing my dreams, my passions, my sanity, to provide you with the life you so carelessly take for granted." The silence that followed was deafening, the air thick with the tension of a truth that could no longer be ignored. Melissa, her face pale and drawn, her carefully crafted composure shattered, finally saw me, the man she had taken for granted, the provider she had exploited, the husband she had emotionally abandoned. And in that moment, as I looked at her, the woman who was supposed to be my partner, my lover, my confidant, I realized that the marriage we had built was nothing more than a gilded cage, a prison of expectations and unfulfilled desires. I had reached my breaking point, the line crossed, the illusion shattered, and as I turned and walked away, the echo of my own words ringing in my ears, a new resolve solidified within me. I would no longer be a victim of her indifference, her entitlement, her emotional neglect. I would reclaim my life, my happiness, my future, and I would do it on my own terms. The remnants of our explosive argument hung in the air like the lingering scent of burnt toast, a bitter reminder of the chasm that had opened up between us. Melissa, her eyes red-rimmed, her carefully constructed composure shattered, sat on the edge of the bed, her silence a tense counterpoint to the frantic beating of my own heart. "Melissa," I began, my voice surprisingly steady, the calm a deceptive mask for the turmoil that raged within me. "We need to talk." She looked up, her gaze meeting mine with a flicker of apprehension that quickly morphed into a defensive defiance. "Talk? About what? About how I'm a terrible wife? A spoiled brat? An ungrateful—" "No," I interrupted, my voice firm but gentle, the anger tempered by a weary sadness. "About us, about the fact that we've become strangers living under the same roof, our marriage a hollow shell of what it once was, our connection a faded memory." She flinched, the truth of my words hitting her with the force of a physical blow. "But I love you, Adrian," she stammered, her voice cracking with a desperation that was as unconvincing as it was belated. "Love," I echoed, the word a bitter taste on my tongue. "Is that what you call it, Melissa? The indifference, the neglect, the constant dismissal of my needs, my feelings, my very existence?" I didn't realize," she began, her voice trailing off, the excuses dying on her lips as she met my gaze, the resolve in my eyes a stark contrast to the complacency she had grown accustomed to. "You didn't realize that I need more than just a roof over my head and a hot meal on the table." I continued, my voice rising with the frustration that had been simmering for years. You didn't realize that I crave connection, appreciation, a partner who sees me, hears me, values me for who I am, not just for what I provide? She opened her mouth to speak, but I held up a hand, silencing her protests. I'm done, Melissa, I said, my voice firm, the decision a weight lifted from my shoulders. I'm done with the empty promises, the half-hearted apologies, the constant cycle of hope and disappointment. I'm giving you an ultimatum. The word hung in the air, its finality echoing through the silent room. Melissa's eyes widened with a fear that was as much about losing her comfortable lifestyle as it was about losing me. An ultimatum? She echoed, her voice barely a whisper. Yes, I confirmed, my gaze unwavering. You have a choice to make, Melissa. You can either wake up and realize what you're about to lose, or you can continue down this path of emotional detachment and watch as our marriage crumbles before your eyes. But what do you want? She asked, her voice laced with a desperation that was both pathetic and infuriating. I want a partner, Melissa, I said, my voice softening slightly, the anger tempered by a lingering sadness. I want a wife who sees me, hears me, appreciates me. I want a woman who shares my life, my dreams, my burdens. I want a love that is more than just a convenience, a transaction, a comfortable arrangement. I paused, letting the weight of my words sink in. If you can't give me that, Melissa, I continued, my voice hardening with a resolve that surprised even myself, then I'm walking away. I'm not going to waste another day, another month, another year on a marriage that is slowly killing my soul. Her face crumpled, the carefully constructed mask of indifference finally shattering, revealing the fear, the insecurity, the vulnerability that she had hidden for so long. But even in her despair, I saw a flicker of something else, a spark of recognition, a dawning awareness of the damage she had caused, the life she had taken for granted, the man she was about to lose. The silence that followed my ultimatum was deafening, a suffocating blanket of uncertainty that wrapped itself around my every waking moment. Days turned into nights, the routine of work and childcare a monotonous drone that did little to quell the anxiety that gnawed at my soul. Would she fight for us? Would she finally see the chasm that had opened between us? The chasm her own indifference had created? Or would she shrug, her apathy the final nail in the coffin of our marriage? I went through the motions, the provider on autopilot. The bills were paid, the groceries stocked, the children's laughter echoing through the house like a bittersweet symphony. But the emotional investment, the energy I had once poured into maintaining the facade of a happy family, was waning. Each shared meal felt like a performance. Each goodnight kiss a hollow ritual. Each I love you, a lie that tasted like ash in my mouth. Melissa, bless her oblivious heart, seemed to be operating under the delusion that a few extra hugs and a steezy, strategically placed thank you would suffice to appease the volcano she had awakened. She'd brush against me in the kitchen, her touch a fleeting whisper of a connection that no longer existed. She'd compliment my cooking, her praise a hollow echo in the cavernous space that had become our emotional landscape. "You're such a good provider, Adrian," she'd murmur, her voice a saccharine lullaby that did little to soothe the savage beast of resentment that was stirring within me. "Provider?" I'd echo, the word a bitter joke on my tongue. "Is that all I am to you, Melissa? A paycheck? A handyman? A glorified babysitter?" The question would hang in the air, unanswered, its silence a testament to the truth she couldn't or wouldn't acknowledge. And as I watched her flit through her days, her schedule a carefully curated blend of self-indulgence and manufactured busyness, the patience I had once possessed for her self-absorption wore thinner than a politician's promises. The nights were the worst. The silence of our bedroom, once a haven of shared dreams and whispered intimacies, now echoed with the ghosts of our past, the unfulfilled promises, the unspoken resentments, the growing realization that the woman lying beside me was a stranger, her heart a distant island I could no longer reach. I'd lie awake, my thoughts a restless tide, the years of sacrifice, the unfulfilled expectations, the emotional neglect, washing over me like a relentless wave. Had I been a fool? Had I poured my life, my love, my very soul into a vessel that was incapable of holding it? A relationship that was more about convenience than connection? More about transaction than true partnership? The doubts gnawed at me, their whispers growing louder with each passing day. Perhaps I was better off alone. Perhaps the freedom to pursue my own happiness, to rediscover my passions, to build a life that was truly my own, was worth the pain of separation, the uncertainty of the unknown. And as the days turned into weeks, the silence from Melissa becoming a deafening roar, a chilling realization dawned. The ultimatum, that desperate plea for change, for connection, for a love that was more than just a comfortable arrangement, might have been less about saving our marriage and more about saving myself. The leather of the therapist's couch was surprisingly comfortable, a stark contrast to the emotional discomfort that had become my constant companion. I sank into its plush embrace, the silence of Dr. Evans's office a welcome respite from the cacophony of my own thoughts. "So, Adrian," she began, her voice a gentle invitation to delve into the murky depths of my marital discontent. "Tell me what brings you back to my couch." "It's Melissa," I sighed, the name a heavy weight on my tongue, a sigh a testament to the exhaustion that had settled deep in my bones. "Or rather, it's us. Or maybe it's just me." Dr. Evans, bless her infinite patience and her uncanny ability to decipher the cryptic language of the male psyche, merely nodded, her eyes a mirror reflecting the turmoil I couldn't quite articulate. "I feel like I'm drowning," I confessed, the words tumbling out in a torrent of frustration and resentment. Drowning in responsibilities, in expectations, in the sheer weight of trying to keep my head above water while everyone else seems to be enjoying a leisurely swim in the pool of life. "Tell me about these responsibilities, Adrian," she prompted, her voice gentle but firm, guiding me towards the heart of the matter. And so I did. I laid it all out. The endless hours at work, the financial burdens, the household chores, the childcare duties, the emotional labor of managing not just my own family, but also my extended family, my wife's ever-present mother, her constant needs a subtle but insistent drain on my already depleted reserves. "And Melissa?" Dr. Evans inquired, her voice carefully neutral, her pen poised over her notepad, ready to capture the nuances of my marital discontent. "Melissa," I scoffed, the name a bitter taste in my mouth, "is living the dream, or rather the dream I've worked my ass off to provide for her. Yoga classes, online shopping sprees, mommy and me playdates that sound suspiciously like wine-fueled gossip sessions. She has the life I always wanted, the freedom I crave, the carefree existence that seems to elude me at every turn." "And how does that make you feel, Adrian?" Dr. Evans probed, her question a scalpel dissecting the layers of resentment, envy, and self-pity that had become my emotional armor. "Angry," I admitted, the word a growl escaping my lips. "Resentful, unappreciated, like a glorified ATM machine with a side of handyman services and emotional support on demand." Dr. Evans nodded, her expression a mix of understanding and a hint of professional disapproval. "It seems you've fallen into the trap of traditional gender roles, Adrian," she observed, her words a gentle indictment of the societal expectations that had shaped my life, my marriage, my very identity as a man. "Traditional," I echoed, the word a foreign concept in my modern, supposedly egalitarian world. "Indeed," she confirmed. "The provider, the protector, the strong, silent type who shoulders the burdens without complaint, who sacrifices his own needs for the sake of his family, who equates his worth with his ability to provide." The realization hit me like a punch to the gut, the truth of her words echoing the doubts that had been plaguing me for months. I had become a caricature of masculinity, a prisoner of my own making, my identity defined by the expectations of others rather than the desires of my own heart. "So, what do I do?" I asked, the question a desperate plea for guidance, a lifeline in the sea of confusion that threatened to drown me. "You start by prioritizing yourself, Adrian," Dr. Evans said, her voice firm but encouraging. "You set boundaries, you communicate your needs, You reclaim your right to happiness, to fulfillment, to a life that is truly yours. But what about Melissa? What about the kids? I protested. The ingrained sense of responsibility, the fear of disrupting the fragile equilibrium of my family, battling with the newfound desire for self-preservation. They will adapt, Adrian, she assured me, and they will be better off for it. A happy father, a fulfilled husband, is a better father, a better husband. You cannot pour from an empty cup, Adrian. You cannot give what you do not have. Her words, simple yet profound, resonated deep within me, a spark igniting in the darkness of my despair. I had a choice to make, a choice between continuing down the path of self-sacrifice and quiet desperation, or a choice to reclaim my life, my happiness, my right to a future that was defined not by the expectations of others, but by the desires of my own heart. And as I walked out of her office, the city lights blurring into a canvas of possibilities, I knew that the journey ahead would be challenging, the road uncertain, but I also knew that I was not alone. I had Dr. Evans's guidance, my own newfound resolve, and the unwavering belief that I deserved more, that I was worthy of a love that was reciprocal, a life that was fulfilling, a happiness that was truly my own. The silence stretched, a taut wire strung between us, vibrating with the unspoken anxieties, the conflicting desires, the weight of a decision that could shatter the fragile remnants of our marriage or forge a new path, uncharted and uncertain. Melissa, her face pale and drawn, her eyes reflecting the turmoil within her soul, sat across from me, the breakfast table a battlefield where the war for our future was being waged. "Adrian," she began, her voice a hesitant tremor in the stillness of the morning. I don't know what to say." "Then don't say anything," I replied, my voice surprisingly calm, the resolve I had fought so hard to find now a steady anchor in the storm of emotions that threatened to consume me. "Just listen." And she did. She listened as I laid bare the wounds she had inflicted, the scars that her indifference, her entitlement, her emotional neglect had etched onto my heart. I spoke of the loneliness, the resentment, the growing sense of detachment that had poisoned our marriage, turning it into a transaction, a business arrangement, a hollow shell of what it once was. "I love you, Melissa," I said, the words a confession that tasted bittersweet on my tongue. The love, a flickering ember in the ashes of our shared past. But I can't live like this anymore. I can't keep sacrificing my happiness, my well-being, my very soul, for a relationship that feels more like a prison than a partnership. Her eyes welled up with tears, the regret in their depths, a mirror to the pain I had carried for so long. I didn't realize," she whispered, her voice cracking with a vulnerability that both touched and frustrated me. I didn't understand." "You didn't see me, Melissa," I corrected, my voice firm but gentle, the anger tempered by a weary sadness. "You didn't see the man I was, the man I could be, the man I deserved to be. You saw a provider, a fixer, a means to an end, and in doing so, you lost sight of the husband, the lover, the partner I craved to be." She reached for my hand, her touch hesitant, a plea for connection that both tempted and terrified me. I looked at her, the woman I had loved, the woman I had thought I knew, the woman who was now a stranger, her face etched with the consequences of her choices, the price of her emotional neglect. "I'm scared, Adrian," she confessed, her voice barely a whisper. "Scared of losing you, scared of losing the life we've built, scared of facing the consequences of my own actions." "We all have choices to make, Melissa," I said, my voice softening with a touch of empathy that was as much for myself as for her. "And sometimes, the most difficult choices are the ones that lead us to the greatest rewards." The silence stretched again, the tension palpable, the air thick with the weight of her decision. And as I waited, my heart pounding with a mix of anxiety and anticipation, I realized that I had already won, for I had found my voice, my strength, my resolve. I had set my boundaries, expressed my needs, and reclaimed my right to a life that was truly my own. I want to try, she finally said, her voice a fragile whisper that held a glimmer of hope, a hint of the woman I'd once fallen in love with. I want to be better for you, for us, for our family. I know it won't be easy, but I'm willing to do the work, to fight for us, to rediscover the love we've lost. Her words, though laced with uncertainty, were also a promise, a commitment, a plea for a second chance. And as I looked at her, the woman who had broken my heart, the woman who was now offering to mend it, I felt a flicker of hope ignite within me, a cautious optimism that perhaps, just perhaps, this wasn't the end of our story, but the beginning of a new chapter, a chapter where love, respect, and genuine connection were not just ideals, but the foundation upon which we would rebuild our marriage, our family, our lives.